should have a presentation any moment.
Yeah, no worries. I'm very glad to be here. I told Todor congratulations for this gathering, because it was that interesting that I drove 6 hours from Bucharest to join you today. And because I was very much interested to see lots of panelists, lots of transsectorial expertise, because disinformation is about a lot of expertise from lots of fields. My slice of the story would be about the EU and how EU-related disinformation went through the general public, how was impactful, because not all of the fake news of disinformation spread around during this year's election, but also during the last 2 years, as our monitoring report shows, have been impactful. So to our mind, it was very important to see which kind of disinformation and what kind of fake news have been believed, endorsed, engaged, and so on. What was worrying for us in 2012 in 2022 when we started this monitoring, annual monitoring report, but now it will be more frequently, it was the fact that citizens of Romania, but it's the case of all countries, do not know what to believe anymore. If you are looking at the surveys, public opinion polls, and we did that for our research here and there, if you ask them about the EU, you'll see a bunch of 30% of the people who said yes. For instance, did Romania benefited from the EU or not? 30% will say yes. 20% will say no, but over 50% will say, I don't know what to believe. And this bunch of people, more and more on different topics, EU-related, being in this bubble of thinking which is right or which is wrong, is something that should be worrying. What else have been doing for, not only for this monitoring report, but this one is more, let's say, spectacular because it was an electoral year. In Romania, we have had EU elections, and now we are preparing for impact with the national election and the presidential election. So it was much more interesting, let's say. But we have been also looking at the how different actors have been behaved in an online environment, because this is also interesting to see how media has done on this, how the political leaders, being far right or being mainstream, have been endorsed or engaged in the debates or have been even riding the waves of disinformation because of the audience. And then how much the public communication has been there, because, thank you, because disinformation is getting around as much as the information is not there. So basically, this is what we have been looking at, and it's a very brief slice of our narrative impacts. These were the main issues that we have been looking in 2023, 2023 and 24. Basically, audiences of dis and misinformation, EU-related, but you can put everything you need to know. And also, we have been looking at also strategic topics such as war in Ukraine, different crises, COVID crisis, and so on. So anti-EU narrative most frequently disseminated over the last years in social networks, online TV. Case studies. Who were the influencers on key topics, information and disinformation? even though they are not comparable because they have different audiences in terms of what we have had on the table in data analysis was interesting for us. Analysis of audience peaks and overlaps with key political moments on the public agenda, case studies and mentions with strong impact. Of course, we won't have time to look into the details. The report is also available. A little bit of context for Romania, and what is also worrying, the largest increase of far-right votes in Europe, with almost 20%. Of course, in 2019, we have had none, so yeah. Also, two worrying trends about the youth voting preferences and youth voting intentions. 23% of young people who express an intention to vote indicated nationalists. And when asked why, because they are on TikTok. So, what we have also seen during our public opinion polls is a significant decline in EU trust among Romanian citizens following the start of the pandemic. That was a turning point. Luckily, we are still pro-Europeans, and of course, we have reason to believe that Romanians are still on the EU side, but the trend is worrying, and I think that we should put more resources in looking at it and better communicating to key stakeholders. This is just one of the toxic elements spread around and artificially amplified by different actors. I will be talking about the lack of resources in terms of analyzing, and when I'm saying analyzing, to give a quick analysis of the content, or whether is organic or is fake or is amplified. So one of the toxic meta-narrative is, of course, about the EU collapsing, have been circulated among different sources, and we believe that there is an increased artificial amplified content, because we have seen a lot of, sorry, I run a little bit faster. Not that fast, please. I think I should go back. Yeah, I will wait for you. So, of course, that topics, we have been looking at different topics relevant for the EU, strategies, policies, crisis responses. Some of them have been targeted by disinformation, by far-right, but by different political actors. Some of them not. For instance, we do not have the anti-refugee sentiment. We do not have anti-migrants narrative. There are some, but they're not necessarily relevant in terms of impact on an audience. But definitely, there have been some cases that were surprising for us, such as digital services. Yeah, thank you. Just an example about the climate dictatorship. I think it's also the case for Bulgaria, how this narrative has been circulated. The conspiracy theory leaders are, and also, of course, the political leaders from far right are spreading a lot disinformation and misinformation about the Green Deal, false claims on EU measures, And but what we have seen, and I think that this slide is very relevant, you'll have on the one side how disinformation has been spread, and on the other side how information has been spread. So where it was a lot of information about the Green Deal, you have seen endorsements, you have seen highlights, you have seen a lot of content, where of course, the climate dictatorship, even though has its adepts, has not been that impactful. What also helped during last year was a turning point for the social networks. Google, for instance, did that during this year's election, ranking the sources, the main sources, the EU sources, ranking them first, which was indeed interesting to see. And these are some, let's say, captured topics and EU policies by conspiracy theorists. We wouldn't believe without looking, without paying attention to these targets. Basically, top 20 people talking in the internet about the digital services such as EID, or digital wallet, or digital services, are people coming from the far right and conspiracy theorists adepts. Worrying is that more and more policies have been blocked by this kind of people and by the political mainstream because of the voice of the internet. And this is the third case this year. The conspiracy of eliminating cash. The government, of course, wanted to make a little bit of limitation in circulating cash, and the Facebook and the internet explode, and of course the government had to make a step back, which in terms of taking decisions by looking at the internet, I think is also a trend that we should be worried. So, in short, because I've been told that I have 7 to 10 minutes, so I use my background of journalist, so I think I'm almost there. Key takeaways from our monitoring reports and working also closely with the media. Truth is lacking infrastructure, at least in Romania. Of course, social media networks and their algorithms are a big part of the problem. Let's hope for the best after the DSA will be enforced. Rising influence of TikTok, let's hope for the best after the content will be moderated. But there are still things that we should be working on like gaps and irrelevance of public communication. This information is getting around because the information is not there. And we have been working exactly on these narratives with different kinds of audiences, and we have been seeing that information is not there. And it's also part of the atomization of the press because they don't have time and they don't have power and they do not have enough resources to cover and to simply explain key and essential policies that will be followed. Political communication, of course, they are riding the wave of not of the populism, but if a topic has traction, they will be there. Political communication tend to be both inadequate and repetitive. This deficiency creates a vacuum that allows disinformation to thrive. Coordinated, consistent, and proactive messages from the local politicians and also from the European politicians helps. We have seen that when disinformation is spreaded and mainstream politicians are there to counter it, it has impact. And last but not least, we are witnessing a toxic media phenomenon of political advertising. Basically, mainstream politicians are buying messages, slots, explaining when when serves their interest, explaining different policies, different assessments of the European Commission. It was the case of this year of the CVM report. You know that Bulgaria and Romania have had the cooperation and verification mechanism. It was ended, and another report came in place. It was, let's say, a positive report where our politicians bought advertising in media, which significantly contributes to decline in public trust, because nobody, usually they are not using this public advertisement in and outside the electoral periods, significantly affect the trust in mainstream communication channels. Among the last legitimate channels to play a role in countering disinformation. This is in brief the landscape that we have been seeing. What I didn't mention is that we need to bring more technology in looking at those things. We are still lacking in putting resources together. We need, I would say, and also it's the case for media, we need accessible technology to analyze these trends, to be more present, to be quick, and not to be reactive, but to be proactive, because once the intoxication of the collective mind is there, it's very hard to get a treatment. Thank you.